Hey guys, how's it going? It is Coach Malcolm, and today I'm going to be doing a lesson on en passant. So, many of you may know en passant as a special type of pawn move. Maybe some of you guys know how to do it. Maybe some of you guys are a little unclear, or maybe you have no idea whatsoever what en passant is. But don't worry, we are going to be going over it completely in this video. So, what we're going to start off with is just a very, just a basic game that I have um, put together. There's nothing. It's not even a complete game. It's just to show you guys the concept of en passant. So, without further ado, let us get started. Explain what en passant is. So, en passant is when either a white pawn is on the 5th rank or a black pawn is on the 4th rank, and what happens is one of the opposing pawns moves 2 squares, right? So let's say this pawn on d7 moved 2 squares in one move, not d6 and then d5, but just automatically played pawn to d5. If it moves 2 squares up in one go, places itself immediately next to our white pawn on the 5th rank, like we said, then a special move that white is able to do is they are able to take, like this pawn is on d6, and you will see that pawn just disappear. Boom, there it goes. Right? We can go over and over. That pawn is disappearing. But here are the common misconceptions. If black in this position plays pawn d6 and then maybe white develops, then d5, the computer will not let me take on d6 because it has to be 2 squares. It cannot be one and then one. It has to be 2 squares. And if pawn d5 and white decides to play knight f3 and then black plays knight c6 and now white wants to do it, again, you cannot do it because you must perform the en passant move right after, immediately the move after that pawn has gone 2 squares up. So it has to be right away. So let's do another example. Like I said, white pawn on the 5th rank and a black pawn goes 2 squares up to be right next door to it. It does not count if it is this pawn over here, the c5 pawn, because it has to be directly adjacent to that pawn. This pawn cannot take on c6 or take on c6 or somehow make the c5 pawn disappear. So let's do it backwards, shall we, right? This pawn now, like we said, our black pawn on the 4th rank. If this g pawn on the g file, which is adjacent to the f file, moves straight up 2 squares in one go next to this f4 pawn, then f takes g3 is a legal move. If black plays knight c6, knight c3, now they cannot do it. And the same thing, if g3 happens and then g4, black again cannot do it because, like I have said before, right, when the white pawn is on the 5th rank and when the black pawn is on the 4th rank, it has to be immediately 2 squares with that pawn right next to each other, and you have to do it the immediate move right afterwards. No exceptions. So that is how en passant works. Now let us look at just a couple examples just to test this out. So in this position, black plays pawn c5. Take a couple seconds. This one is pretty simple. If you need a pause, of course, do that. How can white perform an en passant here? Right, they can play d takes c6. This c pawn immediately moved 2 squares up. Boom, seated right next to that d5 pawn. D takes c6 is completely allowed. That's en passant. Again, if white played queen e2, rook c8, now they cannot do it because they played queen e2, and it has to be the move right afterwards. All right, next up, here we go. So, like I was saying, in this position, if black played pawn c5 here, the question is, can we play d takes c6? What do you think? The answer is no, because that pawn is coming from c6, okay, not c7, which means it is moving 1 and then 1, not 2 squares right away from c7. Since it is going 1 square, en passant is not allowed, all right? We should be getting the hang of this now. All right, here we go. Now we have a bit of a different, this is almost like a puzzle here. After pawn to c5, how can white use en passant? Two different answers in this position to win this game. All right, the correct answer is d takes c6, right? This pawn moved 2 squares straight up, seated right next to that d5 pawn. That goes right away, and now we have also just a lovely fork, and we are going to win that queen after a move like king c7, and now we are just completely up an entire queen. So, what was the other answer? The other answer was this b pawn, right? The b file is also adjacent to the c file, so you are able to play B takes c6. Same idea, just a different pawn, completely up a queen. Okay, this is going to be our last one. Obviously not a very long video, but that is because you get the hang of en passant pretty quickly. All right, here the move played is pawn to d5. How can white completely win the game in this position? There's actually two answers in this position. One of them is en passant, one of them is not. So it's a bit of a tricky puzzle. All right, let's look at the en passant answer first, of course. E takes d6, right? This pawn moved up 2 squares, not 1 and 1, and immediately white seizes that opportunity, opens up this bishop to attack the king, and our rooks do a great job defending all these other squares, okay? What was our other option? Our other option was just a neat e6 checkmate, which could also be played. They're both equal moves. I just thought it was cool that there was two ideas in that position, okay? The knight guards these 2 squares now instead of the pawn on d6 guarding e7, and this is also checkmate. Alright guys, now you know en passant. You can use it in your games. No more funky games where, you know, en passant wasn't allowed, but it happened. We know en passant. We got the hang of it. If it's useful in your game, completely use it. En passant is not always the best move, but it is always, always completely necessary to have it as a candidate move, as an option in your mind to be thinking about and consider. That is the end of this video. Thank you, everybody.